I started this video with some clips taken near Oakhampton in Devon. I was on the lookout for dippers and came across one on the first afternoon behind Lidl's supermarket where the east and west Oakman rivers meet. However, I wasn't quick enough to catch it on camera. I tried going to some likely hotspots for dippers, but was unsuccessful. However, on getting back from Devon, reviewing the video footage where I walked to the White Lady waterfall at Lidford Gorge, I see that I managed to scare away a dipper that would have been an ideal subject. A small bird some distance away on a wide-angle action camera comes out at not much more than a dot, and so it isn't worthwhile going back to this clip to check. I've had the P950 for 2 years now, and so it's time for another review and an indication of where I come from in relation to photography. I split the video up into various chapters, with the ones least likely to interest most people put towards the end. I've started with my decisions on why I bought the P950 and my previous experience or lack of it. I've also taken a look at the alternatives to the P950 that are currently available. In another section, I'd moved on to my recent obsession with editing RAW files using DxO Photolab 8, with lots of examples, even from previous cameras, and showing the process itself. I've muddled through with some P950 settings, but have now got around to learning and demonstrating some well-used camera functions. I have a few clips from December to finish with. People like me buy the P950 or P1000 for their zoom capabilities. Converting the maximum focal length of the P950 into a magnification number gives a figure around 40 times, or 60 times for the P1000. With the excellent image stabilization, I can just about get a handheld shot at maximum zoom. This shows comparative sensor sizes. The actual sensor on the P950 is a good bit smaller than 1 centimetre on the diagonal. It is just over 3% of the size of a full-frame sensor, or 30 times smaller, and is roughly a quarter of the 1-inch type of sensor, so it's remarkable that it can achieve quite decent results. That's quite some lens system to achieve this. Starting with the small sensor, we then often need to crop in to get, say, a 16:9 ratio, as in this picture. So even less of that small sensor is being used. I now use Aperture Priority most of the time, together with the widest aperture available. It makes sense to give that small sensor all the light it can get. The aperture also has an effect on the depth of field. Generally speaking, the lower the f number, the shallower the depth of field, and the chance to get the bokeh effect of a subject in focus against a creamy out-of-focus background. This effect is far less marked with small sensor cameras, though I occasionally manage it by accident. I've shown a couple of examples of the camera in shutter speed mode and the need for noise suppression software to clean up the image. I've had a few cameras over the past 20 years, but until I got the P950, everything was done in auto mode, and that's where I started with the P950. Looking at the wiki page on super zoom bridge cameras, the choice seems to be narrowing somewhat. I put a link to this page below. It took me a while to switch the image quality settings from fine to RAW plus fine on the P950. I've used a few apps to process the RAW files, finally settling on DxO Photolab 8. It doesn't come cheap, but I took up a Black Friday offer. You're viewing a slideshow showing pictures before and after processing. These were taken with the P950 over the last 18 months, and pictures taken over the last 20 years with two earlier cameras. After the slideshow, I've shown something of my editing process using DxO Photolab. In this section, I'm going to show the editing process in DxO Photolab 8, or my editing process anyway. I'll start with this picture of a goosander taken on the 4th of December 2024 with the Nikon P950. It's an ISO 400, 1/200th of a second shutter speed, 357mm focal length, which equates to 2000mm in 35mm terms. In other words, as far as this camera will go. So, starting point is to apply a preset, and having taken a glance through them before, decided on a slightly unusual one, which just reduces that orange we had on his feathers bit, makes him a bit more the black and white bit I'm used to, or the dark green, depending what light you're in. As you can see, you can't really see an eye at all at the moment. So let's just see if reducing the blacks will allow an there comes an eye popping out. And don't want to go too far. That doesn't look too bad. We can just quickly take a look at the before and after. Okay, we're adding a slight green tinge to that to those feathers on the head, which is actually pretty much accurate. The only other thing, I think, is just to apply the special and magic that DxO comes up with called Deep Prime XD XD2S. And we could take a look what that looks like using this loop tool. Let's see what it's going to do for us. Well, that's making those head feathers look quite reasonable. What about the rest of the feathers? This reduces noise while preserving detail and even possibly enhancing detail a little bit. Well, that looks pretty reasonable. The only other thing is there's rather a lot of water. Could do with chopping this picture down a bit. Let's bring it in. Gives me room to move into. Perhaps a bit more still. Getting fairly central. If I can see those box. Yeah, that should do. So you don't see the final effect until you actually export it off, in this case to a JPEG file. This is working away briefly, and the JPEG should pop up any second now. And we get a look at the finished object, which is quite a reasonable sort of picture for saying it's at that sort of length. I mean, hopefully I'll get one a bit closer before long. Okay, that'll do for that one. Moving on to the other one. This is a much older image taken back in 2007 on a Canon EOS 350D camera, a budget-end DSLR. And sadly taken in JPEG because even though it would take raw pictures, I wouldn't have had a clue back then what a raw file was. It's ISO 100, 1/100 of a second, 31mm focal length. This is APS-C. You multiply, I think, by about 1.5, 1.6 to get any 35mm terms. That's too much for my brain to take in at this second. So looking at the image, you can see Donkey's coat doesn't stand out too well. Nor does this one. No, that's not too bad, actually. I think if we go in and just start by applying a preset, then we really need to just take away those blacks a bit. Let's decrease the light at the top. Oh, sorry, let's put it onto the luminosity curve. Take away some of the light at the top end. Increase the light at the bottom end. Probably increase the contrast a touch. Oh yes, that's nice. Brings out the black donkey's coat rather nicely. Oh, and the other one's not looking too bad. Don't know if we dare to increase the intensity of this a bit. That's not adding too much, I don't think. Can't say it's done very much for it. Shadows are standing out a bit more, suddenly notice them. Bit of sharpness. Ooh, I need to probably go very easy with that. It probably doesn't need much. Lens softness compensation. Not sure either if those last touches are needed really, but they don't seem to have made it any worse. So, in this case, we can do a comparison. A before and after. That's the after. And this is the before. So as we come through, the black donkey's got a nice sheen to his coat now. Looks a lot healthier. Shop front has got a whole lot nicer to look at. Much more attractive. We can actually see to the back of the shop inside properly. White donkey has got a proper coat on now. And somebody's door, well, looks a lot nicer. Listen, this is an if only sort of picture. If only I'd framed it right, it would be a nice picture. I think we can save that. I mean, it will never be brilliant. Got the wrong framing completely. But it's a bit late for that now. And there it pops up. In this case, we can't apply any magic. Doesn't really need much magic in any case, because it was a JPEG in the first place. And so it would have been a really nice picture. And there we go. Okay, this display button here allows us to see all sorts of things on the screen. We press it, take away most of the information, just leave the focus point. Press it again, we can see just about level. We can see highlighted below the aperture setting and the shutter speed. And if we go off into the menu system, we can look into the AF area mode. And I generally have it set to one of these manual modes. So manual normal looks about right. Back out of the menu system. I've got the mode dial on top here set to A for Aperture Priority. At the moment it's allowing me to adjust where the focus point is. I can move it up and down using this rotary multi-selector. If I'm happy with it, then press OK. Now it's gone and it's highlighted the aperture setting. We can rotate this to take the aperture up. I can't actually take the aperture down any further. I like it on the widest aperture or the lowest f number possible. Press OK. And we go back to being able to set where the focus point is. Press OK on that. And now if we press left, if we press on this right button, multi-selector, we get to the exposure setting. And we can either press up and down or rotate it. And we can use that histogram on the left to see that it's about right. Whoops, got the wrong setting. Press right. Get the histogram, it's looking just a touch too light. And if you leave it too long and don't make your mind up, it just goes back to the original setting. I'll tick it down one and press OK quickly. Press left on this rotary multi-selector to get to the timer and press OK quickly if you want to set a particular timer. And if we press down, it just goes to the normal. Do we want just autofocus, a close-up, or a very distant shot? And I think that about covers it. Just running through once more. It's on the aperture setting now because the box at the bottom is highlighted in yellow. Take it to the right. Rotate anti-clockwise. Press OK. Gets us back to being able to set where the focus point is. Press OK. With the aperture setting highlighted, if we press right, we get to the exposure. If we leave it, it just goes back. Press left, get to the timer, just leave it, and it will disappear. And then we're back to where we were. I think that about covers it. Okay, this time I'm still in Aperture Priority mode, but I've got manual focus selected. So this rocker is across on manual focus. And we can switch between the focusing mode and the aperture mode just by pressing down. Or pressing down again to get back to the focus mode. This command dial controls how much it highlights what is in focus, which is very useful at times. You're pressing this rotary button on the left, dials us in by 2 times or 4 times, or back to normal. Pressing it on the right does an autofocus. Getting back to the aperture priority, you can see the box at the bottom is in yellow. Now if we press right, we can get to the exposure setting. Dial it up or down according to that histogram on the left. Accept that, or we can press this button to the left and decide to set some seconds before the camera takes a picture. And I think that more or less covers it. And no birds are going to interrupt me this time. And this time I've moved on to shutter priority. The dial is on S at the top. I'm in autofocus because I can't imagine using this in manual focus. If I just press this, we can see that highlighted in yellow at the bottom is the speed of how fast the shutter is going to be open. So it's going to be open for 1/1/250 of a second. And I can rotate this command dial at the top to control this. I suspect that if I went up to that kind of speed, I would get a black photograph. I mean, I suppose for interest we could just see what happens. Yes, a bit dark. So let's move down to something a bit more appropriate. Still a bit dark. So while we're in this mode, we can just press on this. Increase the exposure or decrease it. And we can go that side. I can't imagine why we'd be putting a timer on. So the main thing in shutter priority is just to control the kind of settings you can get until you get things light enough to be usable, or fast enough to be usable. I suspect that would have been all right. So we just need a little bird to pop on. So that's a bit simpler. Okay. And to finish, 4 short clips taken in December 2024. I've been out birding very little in December. The goosander is still too distant for a good view. The teal seemed very excitable one morning and occasionally carried out an action that slightly resembled a goldeneye in the mating season.